Matthew Holt with the Healthcare Blog. Thrilled to be talking with Jesse Ehrenfeld. He is an anesthesiologist at Vanderbilt, somewhere in the south.
Yep, Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee, right. I knew it was one of those southern states that I should be kidding. Also, the chair-elect of the board of the American Medical Association.
Correct. I've been with the AMA for several years now.
Fantastic. And we were on. You joined me on a panel at Health 2, I'd say 3 years back, or something like that. But we've had a lot of fun with the AMA. So a couple of things go on. So the AMA is here at yet another different health tech conference. Roll out a couple of new products. You have a new book out on sort of digital health playbook and some work on AI. So tell us a bit about what the AMA is doing specifically in this area, and then we'll get into some ranting and raging in a minute.
Yeah, we just recently released our digital health playbook, and it's really an attempt to help clinicians wade through the thousands of digital health products, think about how do you identify the needs, how do you go through implementation, and then bring things out into scale. And so it's a step-by-step guide to help sort of walk people through that process, and we're really, really excited about it. We've gotten great feedback so far.
Yeah, I had a chance to look at it last night. I had some really interesting sort of real workphone style things of what you should actually do. Very, very cool. And then, so that's one thing. You're doing the networking group for that Meg Barron runs for the physicians who want to get involved with small startups. Talk a bit about that.
Yeah, we have a number of ways that we're trying to connect physicians with innovators. And one of those ways is we have a physician innovation network. It's free, it's online. Entrepreneurs, developers, physicians can all come together in this kind of online community where hopefully we can bring our perspectives from medicine to the developers and sort of bring better products to the market.
But if I'm a doctor somewhere out there and I want to help develop a technology company that's doing X, Y, or Z, I can literally sign up and become an advisor?
Absolutely. It's kind of like Match.com, but for entrepreneurs and physicians. We call it the Physician Innovation Network, and it's easy. Anybody can join up.
And if I don't like it, I can swipe left and do the next one, right? Okay, whatever it is. I'm an old married man. I'm not allowed to do that. But anyway, okay. No swiping, all right. So that's cool. Now, the AMA is on a policy level thinking about some other areas. One is the new world of AI. Every single company I now work with is claiming to be AI, whether they were or not 5 years ago. Maybe they have an Excel spreadsheet and can run a macro on it or something. But talk a bit about what the AMA is saying about that.
Well, like other health technologies, we want to make sure that what's happening in the AI space works for both patients and for physicians. And a couple of key things around that. One is we need to make sure that we're solving problems that are relevant in the health space. But two, we need to make sure that there's transparency and usability and we have understandability about what these algorithms, machines, and approaches are telling us. Otherwise, we're going to have real problems when it comes to market adoption.
So when you come down to probably the most controversial part of AI at the moment, which is the use of chatbots for things like diagnosis and symptom checking, and there's a lot of play in there. And the most controversial one has actually not been in the US, it's been in the UK with Babylon, where they actually said Babylon could pass the medical exam for a new doctor in the UK. Right. And then a number of doctors went online and ran tests for it, which didn't go so well. Nonetheless, you can see that train coming. What do you think the position that's going to put? I mean, you're an anesthesiologist, so it may not be quite ready for you yet, but for the general practitioners who are dealing with this kind of consumer-facing onslaught, what's your thought about what they should be thinking about?
Well, I don't think that we have to think about AI and other tools as being competitive. I think that they should be able to be synergistic with the tools that we as humans bring, right? There are things that I do as a physician, as a human, that the machine will never be able to do when it comes to empathy and understanding sort of how to frame problems that these tools are solving. And certainly, you know, when you combine the best that AI tools bring to bear on a problem with what I can bring as a human, you get a better solution for the patient, which is what this is all about.
That may be true, but there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road when we get there. So I mentioned the Babylon one where when someone was testing a heart attack and it came back with some different issues. But you've got a similar bump in the road, so say folks like radiologists, with whom, so Bob Wachter, who you know well, was talking to about this in a meeting I was in the other week about which areas of work could be replaced, and radiology is one of them. By the way, he mentioned anesthesiology as well, so I don't know how keen you are about that.
Well, I think that's why it's really, really important to have physicians in partnership with developers bring these technologies together so that we're actually using the technologies to solve problems in the most effective way for the system overall. Look, if you look at the supply and demand curve for provider services across the system, there's this widening gap. We have to use technology to be able to scale the products that we bring into the marketplace, and I think that's where physicians can really play a difference.
All right, so let's take this a little bit wider, because you're doing some great stuff. The AMA, of course, is a huge organization, has a lot of things on its plate, including things around fee setting, around public policy pronouncements dealing with all ranges of specialists. And when Jim Adair explained the whole thing to me, I got totally mind-boggled as to how much was going on there. So let's take a couple of areas which are happening right now and are going to be controversial. So the first one is we're seeing some really big mega mergers. One of them just got approved, Aetna and CBS, or more or less approved with some minor chopping and changing around the edges. And you guys came up with a policy statement about why you think it's not a good idea. So what did you say?
Well, we were particularly concerned with that merger about some of the challenges with anti-competitiveness in the marketplace, and we're just really, really concerned that at the end of the day we're going to end up in a position where patients don't have choice and prices are actually going to increase. And if you look at what mergers have done across various segments of the healthcare industry, in many cases they have actually led to less competition and increased costs. And our primary concerns with that merger that has now been approved, we're in that space.
So in that particular case, you've got essentially a PBM, pharmaceutical management company, merging with an insurance company with a retail chain. The retail chain itself is now developing, but the CBS part is developing a lot of healthcare services as well. Where do you think the reduction in, it sounds like more competition across the space, I mean, especially on the potentially 4 other doctors and health systems out there. Is that not a good thing for America?
Well, more competition is good, but we worry about situations where there may be reduced choice on the consumer side. So if suddenly...
You meaning particularly in our health plans?
Absolutely. So if a health plan says, you have to go to this particular facility, this particular pharmacy, this particular tier of drugs, for whatever reason, ultimately that should be a decision that's made between the physician and the patient, not driven by external parties. And that's a lot of what drives our concerns about choice in the marketplace, competition, and cost.
On the other hand, if you look at the marketplace that's evolved over the last 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of great things talked about sort of competition via integration and more effective care. But really you can see that health systems have been out, they've acquired a lot of doctors' practices, which is, I know, not necessarily the heart of your membership, but they've acquired that mostly for filling those medical palaces. And you could argue that Aetna CBS, which is there's a lot of reasons why they did this, but you could argue that what's happening is that you're seeing the growth of organizations around and about the main healthcare system. We're trying to get around those big health systems to deliver care potentially in a more cost-effective manner, and that is something we do need.
Well, I think a lot of organizations are really focusing on how do you bring value, right? How do you bring value to the patient, and how do you do that in a way that is consumer-driven and meets the needs across the system? And it's actually interesting because the biggest growth that we're having in membership of AMA members is in our large groups, because they're seeing that there are products and services that the AMA can offer to help them navigate this evolving space that's valuable to them.
And interesting, because there are a couple of things going on there. One is that if you were to look at, so I live in Northern California, where right now we have the biggest hospital chain, Sutter, in a state investigation to its pricing. They've also been, within Sutter, there's been some concerns of individual physicians about the way that they've been treated, which I'm sure you've heard plenty about. That kind of story is indicating that perhaps there are doctors within large medical groups who don't like the sort of corporatization. Corporate medicine's illegal in California, but don't like the corporatization of medicine per se. Maybe that's why they're looking to the AMA as a representative out of that. But nonetheless, for buyers of healthcare, the effect of these mega mergers, particularly on the system side, on the healthcare delivery side, have not been cost effective, have not increased choice. And in general, I think part of why you're seeing these other organizations on the plan side who felt a little emasculated doing these mergers to try to get around that. Where do you think a typical physician, forget the hospital systems because you're part of a big one, but they're not really physician controlled. Where do you think the typical physicians are going to play out in this? Do you think they're looking for other alternatives as places of employment, or do they think they're accepting they're going to be in these big hospital systems?
No, I think that there's a range of practice models that are viable in the country today, and one of the key priorities for the AMA is to make sure that we have a space where there can be different approaches to creating practices, and whether that's being a part of a large system, a small group, concierge medicine, whatever it is, making sure that there is a space for all those different types of practices is really important. One of the challenges that we see, particularly on the cost side, is there's such a lack of transparency, and we're hopeful that with some of the steps that are happening on the regulatory side, and certainly we have strong policy that favors this, that there'll be more transparency across the entire system, whether that's at the PBM level, with medications, with services, that will help ultimately consumers make rational choices and will facilitate some of the movement that we want to see towards value-based care.
Now, do you think that's going to be good for doctors?
I do. I think everybody wins when there's transparency over what's happening.
Well, I suspect that not everyone's going to win, because if you make PBMs more transparent, there's going to be some losses there somewhere. I mean, let's be real, you're not going to have everybody winning.
I think the patient wins when they get more cost-effective care and there's more transparency across the system.
So let's talk about some other organizations who are sniffing around the healthcare system. We talked about the players in there rearranging what they're doing, but you've got now the largest companies in the world with huge balance sheets who are now starting to sniff around. Obviously, I'm talking the Apples, Googles, Amazons of the world here. They haven't actually got into healthcare services yet. Having said that, I just did a survey for the AHA of some of their members, and I think 8% of them said that they'd already felt that those big tech giants were already in competition with them. You can easily imagine them putting together a bunch of tech-enabled services with real physical, human services from nurses and doctors and others on the top, and bringing in chronic care management and in home care and other areas, putting together something that might actually be very threatening to the current healthcare environment. A, how likely do you think that is? And B, do you think that's good or bad for the average AMA member?
I don't think it's bad for the average AMA member at all. I think that there is a lot that remains to be seen in terms of what those companies can or are planning to do. Certainly, there's so much dysfunction in the system right now that it's ripe for disruption, and I think we're just waiting for some of those things to play out.
Okay, but so now that leads me to thinking that the physician may not be the power at the center of that. The physician may be plugged into another tech system. Now, I've had long conversations. I mentioned Bob Watch already, a conversation with him the other day about the role of the physician turning to being a manager. This is where he's talking about anesthesiology. Yeah. He was actually saying that, with the advances in technology, you can imagine anesthesiologists be managing many more patients and being much more like an air traffic control role than actually, by the bedside of the operating table of each one. So I can imagine a significant change in the way that happens. Again, it's hard to imagine that's going to be seamlessly painful for all doctors.
Well, I think most doctors welcome technologies that let them do the things that are most meaningful. So,
this is why they are not happy with the current state of EMRs, right?
And when I spend hours and hours trying to sift through charts to find the information rather than have that information served up to me, rather than have AI tools tell me where I may need to look because a patient's having a problem, those are the kinds of things that I would embrace, and I think most doctors would embrace, because it lets them do the things that are most meaningful and it lets them use the skills to their highest degree.
So overall, there's a lot going on in healthcare. There's disruption coming. We know that, and I think sort of if you look at the AMA historically, go back to the 1870s, its formation, you go back to its role in national health policy. Historically, a lot of people like me would say, oh, it was a block. In the next couple of last decade or so, with the support for the ACA and some of these initiatives that Jim Adair and your other colleagues have been running, looking at this new world of technology, I'd say that's a very different AMA than what it's been before. But overall, so that's my little commentary. Overall, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of being a doctor in medical practice in the country?
I'm very optimistic. Being a physician is the best job in the world. I am grateful every day that I'm with patients, that I get to do what I get to do. And the AMA is very much looking forward to thinking about how we can shape the use and adoption of technology to improve the system overall. And I think you're seeing that with our innovation ecosystem, with our Physician Innovation Network, with the Digital Health Playbook, with our Integrated Health Model Initiative, with Health 2047, our startup in Silicon Valley. All these different kinds of things are evidence of what the AMA is doing to try to push things forward in a positive direction.
All right, so you heard it here first. The AMA is optimistic about the future of medicine. We'll survey a few doctors and find out if they all agree with you. I've been talking with Jesse Ehrenfeld. He is the board chair-elect of the American Medical Association. Thanks for your time, Jesse.
Thank you.